Welcome back, guys. This week we're looking at mental strength. We are bombarded with information about mental health and how mental health can be under attack and how we can feel strain and pressure, and it just affects the way we are thinking mentally. Well, we're going to do something about that at St Wilfrid's. We're going to launch a program called the Mental Strength Training Program, and that starts this week. So I just want to consider why are we considering building mental strength? Well, my hope and my prayer for you guys, and for myself and for anyone that gets involved, is that we can face life with more confidence, with more resilience, with a greater ability, because we've built some mental strength. We've recognised the things that build our mental strength. And if you're mentally strong, if you're coming into this in a strong position, then you're able to help build mental strength in other people. So are you ready for that challenge? I hope so. Let's get going. We're going to look at two foundational scriptures in the Bible to build our understanding of mental strength. One of them is a time in the history of Israel where they were wandering. They were wandering in the desert, and they were wandering in the desert for 40 years. Not 40 days, not 40 months, 40 years. And the reason they were wandering is because they were waiting to be have the ability to go into the promised land. Now, if you ever think about that, what are we waiting for at the moment? We're waiting for restrictions to end. We're waiting for being able to go back to life as normal. Well, for the Israelites who were wandering in the wilderness, after they'd left Egypt, they'd gone through the Red Sea, which you can read about in Exodus or in Deuteronomy. They were waiting for life to start again. They were waiting for their new opportunity to devise a new normal. You might have heard that phrase people have been using recently. What's normal? What's going to be the new normal? How are we going to cope after this restrictions that we've been facing? Well, the Israelites were given a choice. They were given a choice, and the choice was this: do they follow God and His will and His way for their life, or do they go their own way? And God, through Moses, gave a set of instructions, a set of rules for the children of Israel to follow. And these were known as the Ten Commandments. And we're just going to look at the most important commandment now, the first commandment, which is this. In Deuteronomy 6 verse 5 we read, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength." Now imagine this. The children of Israel have come out of the wanderings, and they're probably tired. They're probably frustrated. They're probably feeling a little bit like we do sometimes, not knowing what's going on, not knowing what's coming next. And they were challenged to put at their most important thing, to love God. Love God with their heart, their soul, and their strength. Let's flip to the New Testament. In Matthew 22:37, Jesus is asked by some Pharisees, some rulers of the law, says, "Jesus, what is the most important commandment?" And Jesus says, "You've got to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind." And Jesus doesn't stop there. He goes on and says, "And the second commandment is just like it. Love your neighbour as yourself." Now, if you read that story in the New Testament, you realise they weren't happy that Jesus put that second commandment in as well, that you've got to love your neighbour as yourself. But that's what we're looking at. We're looking at how our lives are made up of our hearts, our souls, our mind, and our physical, and our strength. We're going to be talking and looking in more detail about the 4 parts that make you up, and how we can work on them, and how they can all add to our feeling mentally strong. So this week, what I want you to consider is this: how strong are you mentally? I've devised a 25 question survey for you to complete in form. And as you complete these questions, you're going to rate them with a score of 5, 4, 3, 2 or 1. A score of 5 means you strongly agree with the statement that's been given. 4 is that you agree. 3 is you neither agree or disagree. 2, you disagree. And 1 point means you strongly disagree. I want you to fill that in, and at the end of it we'll be able to look at which areas of your mental strength we can recognise as strengths, and also the areas that we can develop. I'm going to tell you a little story. The story is about an Old Testament character, and you can read about this in 1 Kings chapter 17. This man was a prophet. That means he spoke on behalf of God. God gave him a message, and his job was to take that, to the person that needed to listen to it. Now, if you look at the prophets in the Old Testament, you realise most of them had difficult jobs. Most of them were going to kings or rulers and saying to them, you're not doing it God's way, you need to repent, you need to stop doing the things you were doing wrong, and you need to turn back to God and accept that God has the best plan for you and your reign. Imagine that. Imagine your job is to go and tell someone else that God's not happy with them. Imagine how popular you would be if that was the case. I can imagine you'd be quite unpopular. Let's have a look in 1 Kings 17. It starts like this. Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, just as a paraphrase here, Ahab was one of those. He was an evil king. He had done the most evil things that any king had ever done. And you can read about it in 1 Kings 16. And Elijah said to Ahab, as the Lord the God of Israel lives, who I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word. Whoa. Imagine this, you are the ruler and you are the king, and you're being told by some prophet that it's not going to rain until he says so. I tell you what, Ahab did not react really well to this. Ahab was fuming with Elijah, because why would Elijah hold off rain? Why would he do that? Well, it's to punish him and to punish him for the rules that he'd made. Now imagine you're Elijah. You've just gone up to the king and you've told him, it ain't going to rain until I say so. What's going to happen next year? Let's read about the next verse. It says this. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Leave here, turn eastward and hide in the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook I have directed the ravens to supply you with food there. I bet Elijah's thinking, that's great. The last thing I want to do is go where people can find me. I'm going to go and hide. And that's what Elijah did. He went and hid. But he didn't just hide anywhere. He hid in the exact place that God had told him to go. Because God had provided for him. Elijah had done what God had told him to do. And Elijah was provided for by God. God gave him a fresh supply of water to keep him alive. Now think about this. Everyone else in that land, their water supply was being turned off. There was going to be no rain and no dew. But God had provided water for Elijah. The other thing he provided him with was food. He says the ravens will bring you food every single day. What can we learn from this story? What can we learn from that story of Elijah? Well, first of all, we can learn that we can listen for God's voice. When you hear God's voice, God can direct you. And God's not always going to direct you to easy, unchallenging things. Sometimes God's going to ask you to do something for Him that might not seem easy to you. I bet Elijah was not looking forward to having to go to King Ahab and saying, this is what's going to happen, there's going to be no rain. But Elijah did it. Elijah was obedient to God's voice. Challenge for all of us. If we were to understand and believe that God was speaking to us, would we be obedient to what God asked us to do? Secondly was this. After Elijah had done what he did, God had a plan for him. God had the next stage sorted. God had already sorted the place where He wanted Elijah to go. Question. If God asked you to go somewhere, would you follow His direction? Would you go? Would you say what He wanted you to say first of all? And would you go where He asked you to go? When Elijah got there, not before, but when he got there, then he saw God's provision for him. I don't know what sort of God you believe in, but the God of the Bible that I read, and especially in this story, is a God who cares for Elijah, who loves Elijah, but wants Elijah to put his trust in him. You might be watching this thinking, I've put my trust in God. You might have experiences or stories of where God's turned up and provided for you. If you have, share them with your form. Share them with each other to encourage each other's faith. You might be sat here thinking, I've never heard God's voice. I've never heard God's direction. I don't actually believe that could happen. Well then, my challenge for you is this. Find someone who does believe that that's happened to them and listen to their story. Listen to what they say. Mental strength training is for all of us. It's the hope and the prayer is during this season that we learn to support and help each other grow mentally strong. That way we can face different things knowing that we're making positive moves in the right direction. So what I want you to do, guys, is take the rest of this form time to complete the worship material. I want you to look at the Microsoft link, either the QR code on the board or the link that's been sent or that you've accessed on Firefly. And what I'd like to do is quietly and on your own fill in that survey.